It's time to steal your nerves and pray to Lady Luck, as you'll be joining us as we enter Grindhouse, the quick-paced narrative game from Everything Epic Games. In this game, you will take control of one of these poor, unfortunate souls who, one way or another, whether it be vet bills, gambling, a fire, or selling your soul for a phone, you're in about $10 million debt, give or take. You have no choice but to play the game of the host and enter the Grindhouse. You will try to survive these 5 rooms, and whoever makes it out with the least amount of wounds will be the survivor who gets the money.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's certainly not going to be easy. The way that the game works is taking turns. You go one at a time. One player will pick up these cards in this order, and they will read the contents of said card to the rest of the group. There's going to be some kind of a flavorful event that occurs, and eventually there will be this red stop section here. That means you don't read the rest because they don't want you to know necessarily the results of what's going to happen in advance. So this could be a choice the players have to make. Sometimes you need to vote on what you want to do. Sometimes some players will do one thing, other players may do another thing. Often it involves dice rolls, so you'll be rolling a die, and depending on the result, that can make a difference. Or you might even be choosing a number and then secretly revealing them to the other players. All kinds of things could happen, but they're all going to be wrapped around some kind of a horrific thematic event. And based on the outcome of that, different players may take wounds or have other consequences occur. The wounds are a big deal. As you can see, you have this little player sheet right here, and all of your wound tokens are dependent on which body part it is. So if you take an arm injury, you will cover that up with this. If you take a second arm injury, then your arm is severed. Unfortunately, you no longer have an arm. If you take 2 torso injuries or 2 head injuries, then your character will die. That makes sure his head's in the right way. And we'll get into what happens if that occurs in a minute. But perhaps more importantly, in the immediate scenario, you're going to lose points. As you can see, an undamaged body part is worth 2 points. 1 damaged is -1. And then if you lose it, it's not worth any points at the end of the game.
As Jonathan stated, you'll be repeating that through 5 rooms. But what if you do die? This isn't one of those games when you're just out of the game. In the beginning, you'll be given one of these persona cards, and when you die, you're going to reveal it. Now, similar to these cards, the bottom half is something that should be kept secret because you're now a ghost, and this is now your ghost ability and win condition. You're not worried about money anymore. You have your own reason to survive in this world. Sometimes it could be you do want to kill everyone, you're a vengeful spirit. Sometimes you want to help people and make sure at least one person makes it out alive. Because of this, multiple people can win. Maybe one person wins as a survivor and gets the money, but multiple ghosts can win as well.
It might even be in your advantage to die, perhaps based on your persona, or even if you think, oh, someone else is going to be the best survivor, maybe I wanted to be a ghost so I can hop on that train.
Now, there are some ways to get around and try to survive to the end or deal as a ghost. There are item cards, which you'll be dealt with some in the beginning. Some, though, are cursed, which could hurt you, but you tend to pass them along. There's also going to be on your persona, some of them can be revealed early on for an ability. Maybe if you were voted as a volunteer, you can force someone else to do that instead. Maybe you can heal, or they could have other weird things depending on what's going on.
Yeah, so there's definitely some factors that can come into play, but largely this game, I think, is really all about the storytelling, the narrative, thematic experience of it. You're in for a creepy, horror-inspired, heavily horror-influenced from movies, comics, all genres of horror.
Not as personalized, but definitely Saw-esque.
Right, yeah, there's definitely, it gets gruesome. I mean, you can see by these parts here that this is not that's the wrong leg. This is not a kid-friendly game. There's talk of blood and gore. There's, again, it's bloody. There's gruesome stuff in there,
now,
but in a fun, tongue-in-cheek way.
Now, this came from a Kickstarter, and as far as I can tell, this will all be included in the base game if you find it online, including this little mini Krampus expansion.
Yeah, you do get these nice dice here. Sometimes you may have to roll more than 1 die, depending on, again, some of those cards. And the cards, I think, do have a pretty good variety of stuff to encounter.
Yes, we had one game when no one really died. So at the end, we all made it alive and we counted pretty much wounds. Another one, 3 people died like round 1.
Right.
So you never know what's going to go on. Some of those choices could be interesting, especially the volunteering. They could kill someone instantly, maybe that person who volunteered is the only one who doesn't take wounds, so you can't be certain. And it's not 100% logical either. This is very random game, very random game.
Yeah, that's one of those things that certain players will definitely not be into. Is like you said, sometimes you're just making a guess. You're saying like, well, it's like, do you go into this cupboard or not? Just as a dumb example, and it's like, I don't know, the cupboard might have candy in it, or it could be a bear trap, and you get wounded. Like a lot of the times, you're really making a blind guess. And that's why this is not a game to get into for the competitive spirit of things.
But it is very light, and I think that's the
very
thing to
light,
focus
very
on.
quick.
This is a great in-between game that you just play and see what happens. As you can see with this deck, this is just the base, not including the Krampus expansion. There's a lot of different rooms. This does not include the final rooms. They all have red outlines. They're usually much more difficult and scary. So each experience will be very different. This is one of those games you play one and you're like, wow, that happened really fast. Let's do another round.
Right, yeah, it's definitely, I think the box time is 20 to 30 minutes, and that's very accurate. Like, could even be shorter, depending on if you have some kind of crazy death extravaganza like we've experienced. But yeah, it's like, again, it's very much, you're rolling dice, you're kind of at the mercy of the cards. Maybe you can use some of the items that you have, but you are in for an interesting ride, and I do think that the writing is pretty good. It's not exactly, it's not character-driven, it's not Oscar-worthy writing or anything like that.
I mean, the rooms are random. They can't really make it that specific.
But it's certainly if I had to compare it to another game of a similar genre, I think I enjoy reading these cards, the flavor text of them, more than something like Betrayal at House on the Hill. I think they overall do a pretty good job keeping you in that theme of this creepy, disturbing horror house. Crits and misses for Grindhouse. Crits. The thematic elements of the game are very well done, from the writing on the cards, which can be spooky, disturbing, or funny, to the way that you deal out wounds to yourself and actually see what the damage is to your arms and legs. You constantly feel immersed in this world.
And with a large stack of rooms to go through, not including expansions, there are plenty of horrifying experiences.
Your objectives can be very different game to game depending on which persona you receive. They also can greatly affect what happens if and when you die. In some cases, you may actually want to be killed off.
Depending on those items and personas you receive at the beginning of the game, it'll really change how you interact with other players in the room. You may want to take a lot of those wounds and die, or maybe you just need certain wounds. Either way, it'll make sure to bring some freshness to each playthrough. Misses. To keep the heavy narrative but also light, it's really random. There isn't too much agency you have. A lot of the choices will really come down to yes or no. Are you going to do it or not? A die roll, picking a number. It's less of a strategy game and more just seeing where the ride takes you.
Depending on which rooms come out, which items and personas players are dealt, the chaos factor could be very large or very small, again resulting in a game that might allow players a lot of interaction, a lot of choices to make, or perhaps very few.
We've known Everything Epic for these very heavy narrative games, but usually very big, long ones. They're Secret Series. They also do a lot of the large RPGs, the one they recently did for Vampires the Masquerade. This one, though, is a lot quicker than all of them. And in some ways, I can know for some people that might be really disappointing because, as you said early on, there isn't that much agency in this. But at the same time, because the narrative is so fun to read through, this is one of those games it's designed to be played in between those. I don't think this should be your main course.
Yeah, it's definitely not a meat and potatoes. I think this game would be pretty polarizing. Some people, I think, will play this and just really not have a good time because, like I said, you are making choices, but what the outcomes of those choices are,
it's not that obvious sometimes.
Who knows? Which in a way is fun, and sometimes it just feels like the game is kind of playing itself, which isn't great. And I do think there are better filler games, but the narrative element really is what makes this stand out. And I do think that the way that the wounds work is really cool, and it's fun to look at and funny to interact with. So I think, like you said, there's fun stuff here. It's it's not trying to be more than it is. It is a light filler game.
And I mean, you said there are some filler games you like more. One of the things I do like is sort of because of that lack of agency, this could be the perfect game in between where if you're a little angry because your strategies weren't working out well, this is just everyone can cool down a bit, but still thematically, it's not like it has to be Candyland. We're still in a very dark era, which maybe if it's close to Halloween, the perfect game to use.
Definitely good for that. Certainly if you are a member of or know a group who aren't hardcore gamers also, it's so easy to pick up. You don't even really need to read the rules. Like you just read a card and we see what happens, which is nice for setup and cleanup time. So if this sounds good to you, I think from watching the review, you'll know if this is the type of game that appeals to you. You can check it out. It's called Grindhouse. And if you have played it, then in the comments, maybe you can let us know, have you encountered some scary rooms, or are there some personas or items you particularly enjoy? There are some it can be really comedic too. That's another thing maybe we haven't stressed enough, that yeah, it's very dark and gross, but it's also like kind of a funny game.
It is a party game. I mean, it's that light party game, and it's just funny to see how the weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
Just who decide to volunteer, and all of a sudden you find out they're taking 3 torso damage. You're just like, what? That's possible?
Right. A lot of things can happen. Let us know. Let us know about all the haunts and scares you've experienced in the comments section, or anything else. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this has been Roll for Crit. Oh.
Here's an idea. Support our Patreon or like and subscribe to this channel for more.
Fagulu Miktawa audio expansion Wakana Cthulhu awesome.